You know, apparently I am. How you doing? Doing good. Okay. If I can have everybody's attention real quick, the folks here that are graciously hosting us at Habersham EMC have asked once again. There's a car or two parked in the customer parking area, blocking the drive-through and that sort of thing. If we can move those, the gates are open around back. You're welcome to pull around back and park back there. If you could cooperate with us, we'd appreciate that very much. Thank you. Okay, folks, we're going to start the meeting in just a few minutes, but one last time, if you're parked in a designated Habersham EMC customer parking spot, please move your vehicle around to the back of the building. Sorry to keep asking, but we've got a big crowd here today, and as you can see, we don't want to interfere with their business, and so I ask you again, if you're parked in a spot designated for HEMC customers, please move around to the back of the building. Thank you. Okay, folks, one more time. Any cars that are out there, specifically a blue BMW, tag number CFT 1039, a black Wesleyan Wolves Land Rover. We need that one moved. And then if you're parked along the driveway or anywhere near the drive-through, if you can, please just move around. There's plenty of room to park through the gate in the back. They've got that opened up for us. We apologize it wasn't opened up to begin with, but honestly, we didn't expect as big a crowd as we got. So I'm glad everybody showed up. We want everybody to be here. But if you'll work with the folks with HEMC so they can continue to conduct their business and provide us this service, we appreciate it. Thank you. That's not yours.
Hello, sir. How are you? Doing well. What is it?
Good morning. We're a stickler for time, and we're starting at 9 a.m., so we're actually going to start a couple minutes early. First off, I want to say thank you for coming. This is a great crowd. This issue is a compelling issue to get anybody out and come up and give us your opinions and views. Before I start and before we call to order, just as a means for everyone's planning purposes, I think the way we'll go here is we'll call to order, we'll have opening remarks, we'll have a welcome from the local delegation, recognition of local officials. We'll have some state stakeholders speak. It'll take about an hour. That'll be around 10:30 to 11:30. And 11:30, we'll take lunch for about 30 minutes, and then we'll come back at 12 and then have we've got 20 folks signed up, and we're going to get through all the folks. And I think a couple of folks have asked today to speak. So we're going to try to get through all those. We're going to try to be out of here about 1:30. So just for your planning purposes, I want to give you that. First, let me call this to order, and I'm going to ask Chairman Gunner to say our invocation for us.
If you would, please bow. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the many blessings you've given us. We thank you for the beauty of Northeast Georgia and the task that we have before us. We ask that you give us wisdom and give us the knowledge of what we need to do for our state and for the rights of the people. We thank you for all that you've done for us, and in Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen. Well, thanks again for having us. I do want to give a shout out to Habersham EMC for hosting us today. This is a great venue. We were in Gay, Georgia a week ago, and we had a great venue there. A lot different than this. We were out in an old mill barn, and it turned out real well. Had a great showing there as well. I want to introduce myself. My name is James Burchett. I'm the chair of this study committee. I hail from Waycross, Georgia, so I'm a long way from home. I drove up last night after my son's playoff football game and in the rain. So thankful for the rain, but it was a tough drive last night. I want to give you just some bounds of what the study committee is doing. First off, I want to tell you, the reason that we're here in Habersham County is because you're great local delegation. Senator Bo Hatchett, Representative Victor Anderson, the first thing after this, the creation of this study committee, I got a phone call from both of those gentlemen, and they said, it's important that the community of Habersham has a say in what this study committee is going to recommend. And so you guys have those two folks to thank for us being here in Habersham County. The bounds of this study committee are really fairly simple. We're exploring an issue that is not a new issue. We have many natural resources here and rivers and creeks that all of us love to utilize, and there are two interests there that we're keying in on, and that is the public interest and right to fish, and then the private interest of the property owners. So if you boil it down, that's exactly what we're talking about, and that's what most of you property owners are here to talk about tonight. But I want to reiterate to you, there's a lot of concern around the expansion of the public right and public interest. That's not the intention. The intention is to find a solution and find certainty and clarity. At our last study committee, one of the things that kept coming up was clarity. The folks, the property owners and the guides and the fishermen all just want to know, where can we fish and where can't we fish? The scenario that we keep running into with DNR is this. You'll have a property owner call because someone is trespassing on their property. The fisherman's out there fishing or hunting or whatever they're doing. And the DNR comes and you've got 3 gentlemen or gentleladies with guns on the banks of a river or creek, and none of them are happy. And the DNR agent is having to make a decision on what the law is right there and then. So what we're looking for is clarity so that those scenarios don't come up as often, so that we have an opportunity for folks that have private property to have that exclusive right to your private property, and then folks that are public fishermen to fish in areas where they are allowed to fish. And I know that this community with the Sequoia here is very concerned about that expansion, and that is not the intent. We're trying to study and balance the interest, study the issue and balance the interest. What comes out of a study committee is a recommendation. What we'll do after all of our meetings, we're meeting all over the state. We're meeting in Northwest, Northeast, South Georgia, on many of our rivers. And what we're going to do is come together after that and come up with a recommendation. And the recommendation will be acted on or will not be acted on based on whatever comes out of the committee. So that's the bounds of what we're doing. Very good. All right, I'm going to ask, starting on my left here, I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves and where they represent, and then we'll move into our host remarks. Representative?
Representative Will Wade. I am from Dawsonville, Georgia. I represent the 9th District of Georgia, which is the majority. Sure. Not a problem. Sorry about that. Will Wade, District 9. I'm from Dawsonville, Georgia, born and raised there. And District 9 consists of the majority of Dawson County, majority of Lumpkin County, and 2 precincts in White County, Georgia.
I've already introduced James Burchett, District 176 in Waycross, Georgia.
I'm Victor Anderson, House District 10, which is most of Habersham County and all of Rabun County.
I'm Trey Rhodes. I represent District 124, most of Putnam County, all of Greene, all of Tolliver, all of Oglethorpe, and a portion of Clark.
I'm Vance Smith. I represent District 138, which is part of Muskogee County, 90% of Harris County, my home county, and about 50% of Troup County, which is in LaGrange, Georgia area.
Stan Gunter, District 8. I'm a native of Habersham County, but it's been 41 years since I've lived here. I now live in Union County, representing Union towns and most of White County.
Good morning. My name is Rob Leverett. I'm from Elberton. I represent District 123, which is all of Elbert, Wilkes, and Lincoln counties, and part of Madison, and part of one or two precincts in Columbia. Pleased to be here today with you.
Thank you all, and thanks for all you guys coming up and traveling up here. Next, we're going to move into our host remarks. I'm going to recognize Representative Victor Anderson. Well, we're going to have to slow this down and come back to Representative Al Williams from down south where I'm at to let him introduce himself.
Good morning, Al Williams. I'm getting ready to throw my direction finder away. It took me to Cleveland, and I met a lot of good people, and so good to be here, but I'm not paying my light bill. I represent Liberty County, District 168 on the coast where the water tastes like cherry wine.
Good morning again, everybody. First of all, thank you all for showing up today. This is a serious subject. It's a good topic for us to discuss and try to answer questions that have been asked for years and complaints that have been issued for years and answered by our local and state law enforcement. So we appreciate you all coming. As Whip Chairman Burchett had mentioned earlier, when this committee was formed, Senator Hatchett and myself got in touch with James and asked if there's any way that we could make sure that we had a meeting up here so that our interests and our concerns for the Sequoia River, the upper Chattahoochee Basin, and everything associated with our properties up here, that our voices are heard. And we appreciate everybody showing up to do that today. Real quickly, want to introduce a couple of members of our local delegation and offer them an opportunity to say a few words if they'd like. I know Senator Hatchett is here. Senator Hatchett, he's waving in the back. Did you want to say anything?
Those that are here, this is an important issue for us. And for y'all, right here. When we saw the study committee, Victor and I got together and said, well, we need to bring it here so that our people can express their concerns. Our property rights are, we want to do everything we can to protect that. And that's what, hopefully that message is sent to the committee today. So thank y'all for coming and using your voice. And you can always reach out to me or Victor. We represent y'all. We're here to help you guys. And this is an important issue. The number of calls and texts that I've gotten, I know how important it is to y'all and important to me. So thank y'all for being here, and look forward to a good discussion today.
Okay, and I know we had talked about him being here. Representative Irwin did he make it in this morning yet? Yep, there he is right there. Representative Irwin represents part of Habersham County also, as well as Stevens, Banks, part of Jackson.
And I'll reiterate what Senator Hatchett said. Want to hear the concerns. I'm very concerned just such as you are. I've talked to a lot of constituents already here in Habersham, also in Stevens, Banks County. So wanted to first of all thank the committee for coming up here to hear this. And let me challenge you to take good use of this information you hear.
And we have a couple of local officials here with us today. First of all, Mr. Ty Akins, he's the chairman of the county commission. Ty, where are you at? Right here. There's Ty.
All residents here, welcome everybody here, and thank you to AT&T for hosting this, and appreciate y'all being here. Thank you.
And I do know also we have Mr. Brad Coppage here. He'll be actually addressing the committee here in a few moments. And Brad, I'll let you make a comment or two on behalf of the city of Clarksville. Brad's a member of the Clarksville City Council, as well as the president of the Sequoia River Watershed Association. So,
Brad, would you go to the podium? I'm sorry. I just got a message that no one's being heard.
Yeah, just, let's see if we can do this here. Just a quick comment. This is an extremely important topic for the city, for the county, for North Georgia. We just want to make sure, like it's been stated, that we get an opportunity to voice our concerns, opinions. Please take it to heart. The fact is that we're very passionate about our rivers and our water and our waterways. We just want to make sure, again, that we all have an opportunity to say what we need to say today. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn the meeting back over to you.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start getting into the testimony. Well, I don't think that, let's see, the first four folks, it should be around an hour for the first four folks that are speak, and then we'll move into the public comment. First off, I'm going to call Section Chief Scott Robinson from the Wildlife Resources Division of DNR.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee for your time and attention on this matter. My name is Scott Robinson. I'm the Fisheries Chief for the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. Are we going to show these slides and presentations to the audience here?
If you can, yes. That's the intent.
Is there something I need to do here or?
No, you just hold tight. He's working on it right now.
Okay, thank you.
We didn't have this trouble when we were in the barn.
No. Worked just fine.
Scott, why don't you go ahead and start, and if he gets it up and rolling, we'll plug and play there.
Yes, sir. Well, again, thanks for having me here today. Thanks to everybody for coming. I manage the fisheries section for the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. Fishing is such an important part of who we are here in this state. It's a socially and economically important part of our culture and our heritage and our economy. As you know, here in this county especially, it's a big part of who you are as well. So it's fishing in Georgia is responsible for almost 15,000 jobs, about $622 million in salaries and earnings, and about $1.5 billion in retail sales each year in Georgia. So it's a big piece of our economy, but more importantly, it's a big piece of our culture and really who we are. I would venture to say that just about everybody in this room, either in your home or on your phone, you got a picture of yourself or somebody you love smiling and holding up a fish where they had a great day on the water. It's just really a major piece of who we are, and I can't emphasize that enough. It's good for your health, and it's also, we know that it's good and important for people to learn about and experience natural resources so that they want to protect them in the future. Looks like we've got the slides going now. Let me see. In the past 10 years, we've also received about $85 million in federal sport fish funding. That's an excise tax that's on fishing equipment and motorboat fuel. It's collected at the federal level and then distributed back out to the states based on the number of fishing licenses that are sold. So that's basically what funds our activities along with fishing license dollars. Some of the things that we do to improve fishing, to provide fishing access in the state, in DNR, we operate 10 fish hatcheries. 3 of those are trout hatcheries. We stock about 1 million trout each year in the state. We stock 8 to 10 million other fish each year all around the state. Around 4 million of those support riverine and stream flowing water fisheries. We do a lot of boating access work. DNR's built over 250 boat ramps and access areas around the state, and those are for the public to use. That's, again, an important part of our economy. We monitor and manage fish populations. We monitor trends in fish populations. We set regulations based on that information. And we also do research. We look at water quality, and we investigate fish kills. So if somebody's doing something that causes a fish kill, we look for the cause of that and try to stop that. We operate about 11 public fishing areas to provide public fishing access. And we get the popularity of those has really increased over the last few years. We get about 800,000 visitors each year, which is again a testament to the importance of fishing to our people here in Georgia. We do a lot of habitat work around the state to improve fish habitat in a lot of different ways. We do environmental reviews on projects that may impact fish habitat. And we also do a lot of outreach and education because, again, we think it's important for people to know about and experience these natural resources so that they'll want to protect them for the future so that our grandkids can enjoy those just like we have. Fishing and hunting are so important to this state that they're part of our state constitution. You can read that there. That is directly from the state constitution. Tradition of fishing and hunting and the taking of fish and wildlife shall be preserved for the people and managed for the public good. So that's what we do. We manage for the public good, but it shall be preserved for the people. So it's really was important enough to the leadership of our state to put it into the Constitution. Wildlife is a public resource, but because it's a public resource and because it's owned by all of us, we can invest public resources to manage that and protect it. We can spend tax dollars, we can collect fishing license dollars and the excise tax funds and use that to protect fish and wildlife in this state and manage it in accordance with sound principles of wildlife management. So we get to the issue at hand here, which is navigable streams and who has the right to fish there in our streams and rivers. This is directly from Georgia law. As used in this chapter, the term navigable stream means a stream capable of transporting boats, and I won't read the whole thing. I'm sure you can all read it. So that was defined as a navigable stream many years ago. The legislature felt it was important enough for public access that navigable streams were defined. And you can see the rights of the owners of lands which are adjacent to navigable streams extend to the low water mark in the bed of the stream. So again, the legislature for many years, back to the 1800s, has considered navigable streams an important part of our state, both economy and culture. They've described navigable streams in many different ways and made many different declarations of navigability, including setting toll rates, making it illegal to block passage, and at times over the years, they've actually appointed commissioners or officials to oversee improvements and make sure that navigability is maintained in rivers and streams around the state. We're also, of course, a private property rights state. So non-navigable streams are very different. The owner of the land adjacent to a non-navigable stream owns to the center of the stream and controls the fishing rights to that stream. If the owner owns both sides of the stream, the land on both sides of the stream, they own the entire stream bed and again, control the fishing rights. So that's in state law. Has been for many years. So as you can see, the difference between a navigable and a non-navigable stream can be very important to this discussion. Historically, the Army Corps of Engineers has provided lists and definitions of navigable streams in both tidal and non-tidal waters. That's one thing that we use in DNR as a determination of navigability. There's a traditional navigable waters list, and then there's a major navigable waters list that the Corps of Engineers maintains. So again, we've invested millions of dollars through license fees and federal funds to establish fisheries, boat ramps, and to manage recreational fishing and access to streams and rivers around the state. We stock fish in rivers and reservoirs and do a lot of other things to maintain that access because it's important to our economy. And this past year in the past legislative session, the SB 115 affirmed the right to fish and the right for passage on all navigable streams. So how does DNR determine a navigable stream? This is, we've had to do that many times over the years. Obviously, the legislature has the authority to do that. But in our practice, as we decide where to build a boat ramp, or where do we stock fish, or where do we do fisheries research, we have to determine where we think public waters are. And we've looked at a lot of different factors to do that. Here's some of those listed: current state and federal law, court cases. We've got attorney general opinions on different waters. There are a number of different ways that we've looked at to determine navigability. And the reason there's so many different ways is because of the great diversity across this state. We have everything from mountain streams and beautiful trout streams down to the blackwater rivers of the coastal plain. So just tremendous differences in the aquatic resources. So there's a lot of different ways to determine navigability and a lot of factors that come into play there. One thing that we've been looking at recently is the size of streams. We always have considered that, but we're now able to look at flow. We have some standardized measurements of flow all across the state, and we're looking at what's the flow is generally measured in cubic feet per second of water. And so we look at the mean annual flow of streams. We know that streams between 200 and 400 CFS, cubic feet per second, mean annual flow, are candidates, if you will, to be navigable. We're pretty confident that anything over 400 CFS would be determined a navigable stream by any criteria that you might look at this time. And so I've highlighted in yellow, and I used North Georgia. We split it up into North and South Georgia just to try to make it big enough for you to see. But I've highlighted all those rivers and streams that are over 400 CFS here on this map. And I'll give you a minute to take a look at that. So again, between 200 and 400, we look at a lot of different factors, and almost all of our boat ramps have been built on streams with over 400 CFS. So the streams that you see here, there's just a handful that are between 200 and 400 CFS. The remainder of those are over 400 CFS. And we do consider anything downstream of a DNR boat ramp to be a navigable river. Here's the South Georgia map. And again, 400 CFS is about where we think a cutoff, a solid cutoff is. Now, again, there's many factors that figure into that, and there's probably some exceptions in both directions on that, and some of what comes out of this committee may also figure into that. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my remarks. Hopefully that sets the stage where we're all working from the same set of information. Thank you for having me and for hearing me out on this and DNR's point of view on this. And I'll be happy to take any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Scott. Any committee members have a question? Chairman Leverett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony today. Just want to clarify, I believe you said you're between 200 and 400 cubic feet a second you consider likely to be navigable, and if it's over the 400, you consider it a very strong possibility or likelihood that it's navigable. Is that roughly a fair summary of the position?
Yes, sir. I'd say between 200 and 400 is a possibility, and we would consider it, 30 feet stream width is another way we've looked at it in the past. But yeah, between 200 and 400 is a possibility. I don't know that I'd use the word likely, but possibility, and over 400 we feel like is highly likely that it would be considered navigable by just about anything that I've talked about here.
One other question, Mr. Chairman. And I think additionally, you said your ramps are generally in locations that meet the above 400
Yes.
measurement?
Yes, sir. Almost all the ramps, and those blue dots on the map are ramps, and almost all of those are above 400 CFS, so that we don't want to build a ramp and provide access where it's going to likely put people in a position to trespass, whether knowingly or unknowingly. Yeah.
And then finally, if it's down because of that, I guess, criteria, if it's downstream from a DNR boat ramp, you assume, or there's a strong presumption that that portion of the river is navigable.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, sir.
Leader Wade?
Thank you very much for being here. My question is in any of those calculations in which you've got the greater than 400 or between the 200 and 400, is there a measurement of depth of the stream? I heard you talk about the width, but is there any, I mean, I've been in North Georgia and I've been fishing my whole life, and I can tell you there are lots of places that have really good flow, but it's less than an inch deep. Is that not way into navigability?
It does weigh into it. I expect it would, but it doesn't weigh into CFS measurements. So you could have a very wide river that was just a few inches deep, as well as a narrow river that might be, many feet deep, that would have that sort of measurement.
Thank you again, Scott. Appreciate you coming out here. Going to move on to our next speaker, and that is Mike Worley from the Georgia Wildlife Federation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, our distinguished committee. We've got a tremendous amount of leadership and capability on this committee. I don't have slides. You're just going to have to listen to me put up with me just talking. I do want to thank, I saw Mr. Joe Hatfield, one of our DNR board members in the room as well. Good to see you here today, Mr. Hatfield, and all of our local government folks. Really good to see you here. This is a big issue, an important issue for us. My name's Mike Worley. I'm President and CEO of the Georgia Wildlife Federation. I was asked to come here and lay out a little bit of background about this issue and why we're here, where it all began, and talk a little bit about some of the issues that we all face. First, let me tell you a little bit about Georgia Wildlife Federation. We are the state's oldest member-supported conservation organization. We've been around since 1936. We were founded by hunting and fishing organizations. Georgia Wildlife Federation has approximately 53,000 members across the state. We provide leadership, services, and advocacy in conservation issues across Georgia. We are a proponent for the professional, science-based management of our wildlife and natural resources. And we were founded, like I said, by hunters and anglers. And though our tent has grown considerably larger, hunters and fishing are still an integral part and at our core. So we are advocates for the for our ecological services systems, and we've long been a leading voice in conservation issues associated with our wildlife. Well, I'm going down to the river. I've got a cane pole in my hand. I've got my redworms in a Maxwell House coffee can. I'm going to close my eyes and dream and let the cork bob away my blues. For those of you that don't recognize the words I've spoken, that's from the Marshall Tucker Band's song, Bob Away My Blues from 1975. They cut their first demo record down in Macon, Georgia, and one of our not quite native sons, they were formed in Spartanburg, South Carolina. I quote this song because many of us here today can close our eyes and recall those days of letting the cork bob away our blues. For many of us, it represents time with family. For some of us, it represents friends and tradition and connection to our outdoor world. For some of us, it represents food to take home for the table. For some of us, all of those things can hardly be separated. Georgia, as you heard Scott say, is blessed with tremendous beauty and tremendous opportunity to enjoy the outdoors. We have mountains and valleys, coastal plain, and breathtaking marshlands. We have lazy, slow-moving black water rivers and cataracts of cold mountain streams, as y'all are all familiar with. Georgia has also been blessed with leaders that have recognized not just the beauty of the place, but the rights of our people to enjoy those places. Our leaders and citizens have even enshrined in Georgia's Constitution, as you heard, the right to hunt and fish. However, in recent years, a growing number of landowners and those leasing fishing rights from them are seeking to limit the public's access to our rivers and streams as anglers. No fishing signs have popped up all over Georgia next to our free-flowing rivers, whose populations of fish have been managed, as you saw from Scott, have been managed and protected by dedicated public servants. Those dedicated public servants' salaries and resources are paid by those that hunt and fish, not by those that own land. Our access to those rivers, as you saw on the map, is via boat ramps that are more often than not paid for by hunters and anglers, not by the landowners. I have a copy of the remarks we expected last week. Mr. Chairman, I'll submit those for the record, from our partners at Georgia Hunting and Fishing Federation. They couldn't make it last week, and so they've got some really interesting numbers for the Flint, and I'll use these, and then I'll contrast those to what we see here in North Georgia. So on the Flint River, where all of this stuff started, when some folks filed a lawsuit, in the last 20 years, $985,000 for boat ramps and boating access has been spent. $450,000 for shoal bass research, $445,000 for fish stocking, $520,000 for standardized sampling surveys, $1 million for land acquisitions that were connected to the river, providing additional access. Those are paid for by anglers, all of that. In recent days, we've seen such no fishing signs posted along that iconic Yellow Jacket shoals on the Flint River. The Upper Flint is one of the world's most important fisheries for shoal bass. It's Georgia's official native riverine sport fish. This designation by our legislature and governor was advanced by NGOs specifically to promote and publicize the shoal bass fishery for all Georgians, and as Scott mentioned, for economic development purposes. This is big business, and I think many of you recognize that here in North Georgia. This is big business, fishing is, and so that's for casual anglers, for serious anglers, for fishing guides, and private property owners, everyone. The Flint's not the first river in Georgia to face the exclusion of the public and access, but it's likely the largest and most visible. The Flint and many of our other rivers have been fished for generations of people of all ages, races, sexes, income levels, and walks of life. Now, one would think a fishing dispute 165 miles, I measured it out, 165 miles from here, on a warm water Piedmont River involving a warm water species wouldn't have any impact here in the North Georgia mountains. I look around this room and I think that's probably not right. Here we are in North Georgia, home to our native brook trout, regionally recognized trophy trout fisheries, both public and private. And the issues of navigability, non-navigability, public dedication, and fisheries management, not to mention just the traditional uses, combined to make the Soquee, the Chattahoochee, and other North Georgia streams particularly thorny. We attempted to pull together some statistics similar to what I talked about on the Flint. I want to point out, though, that these statistics that I'm going to quote are fundamentally different. Why? Because North Georgia is fundamentally different. The streams that we're talking about up here are fundamentally different. For a river like the Flint, we can tease out specific numbers, but fisheries management doesn't normally track work on individual streams. It's difficult to break down the small streams, these cold water streams, and their management and state investment. In the last 5 years, Georgia has produced and stocked about 1 million trout per year, except when the hatchery renovations were going on, in 100 different water bodies. We've managed wild trout populations through population surveys, conducted habitat surveys and enhancements, and done genetic surveys. DNR has reviewed and approved stream buffer variance applications, trout stocking requests from private entities, and provided environmental education through hatchery tours, fishing events, and presentations. They've provided environmental reviews and consultations with partners and with permit applicants to protect river and stream and fish habitat. They conducted research surveys on riverine black bass and promoted and improving fish opportunities for shoal bass in the Chattahoochee up here, even as we get further north, the Chestatee, Bartram's bass in the upper Savannah Basin, and the Chattahoochee bass in the upper Chattahoochee Basin. Stocking of walleye. Many of you are fishermen that pursue many species. Striped bass, hybrid striped bass, and white bass provide significant fishing opportunities in rivers when these species migrate upstream from the reservoirs where they're stocked. These species would not exist in fishable numbers without DNR, culture, as in growing them, and stocking efforts. So the point I'm making here is that there's a tremendous public investment in streams here. Our DNR, as you saw Scott and some of the points that he used and the standards that they've used on some of these deciding whether things are navigable and non-navigable, they've used experience and judgment along with some measurable parameters and common sense to establish balanced public access and private control along these smaller streams. As we deal with these issues, we face competing priorities. I hope we can come up with a system that protects the public anglers and their investments, along with the private fisheries and their investments. Of course, this will be a challenge. There's one I'm confident that you as members of this committee can overcome. Generations of private stream ownership, history, management, and angling coexist here in the mountains with a strong tradition of public ownership and public fishing rights as well. A thriving trout fishing economy has developed here in North Georgia, and we should acknowledge and protect that part of our rural economy and that part of our outdoor heritage. As we know, all of our rivers' waters are untitled. They're owned by no one, nor are the fish. They're both held in the public trust. It's hard to imagine even owning a river or ownership of a river. The water off of a piece of property would have been owned by somebody upstream a few minutes earlier, and it'll be owned, if you're claiming you're owning the waters, it'll be owned by somebody else downstream in a few minutes. It's not the kind of ownership I'm familiar with. So unquestionably, on those larger rivers managed with angler dollars, it's harder to understand. We do have folks talking about claims of taking and those kinds of things. It's hard to understand the claims of taking when a fishery is better today. You heard the numbers that we talked about in management. When the fishery is better today because of anglers, the water quality is better today because of anglers. The habitat is better because of anglers. The property itself is more valuable because of anglers and state management of the resource. The improvements of these rivers, largely from the investment of the angling community, has dramatically increased the value of these adjacent properties. Riverside property owners benefit enormously, recreationally and financially, from the public trust care provided for these waters and these fisheries. The property, the land, is far more valuable because of the investments on behalf of and by our anglers and our public. Oftentimes, to me, it sounds more like the fishing public is giving rather than taking. On the final day of the 2023 session of the Georgia General Assembly, you, our legislators, passed Senate Bill 115. Governor Kemp's approval of that bill to become law, he signed it on May the 2nd with his signature. Georgia affirmed anglers have the right to fish on all of Georgia's navigable streams, and it took effect on July 1. Senate Bill 115, we believe, removes confusion and chaos and firmly establishes in law the way the vast majority of our streams have operated throughout our lifetimes, the way the Marshall Tucker Band sang. A flowing, navigable stream belongs to all of us, regardless of who owns the land adjacent to or even the land underneath. Senate Bill 115 assures future generations that fishing is for all of us. We all can continue to bob away the blues. Those of you familiar with the Marshall Tucker Band will also note I left out an important line. I'm going to sit under a shade tree on a riverbank where it's cool. Senate Bill 115 does not give anyone the right to come onto private property or sit under a shade tree on that private property. It doesn't give anyone the right to paddle up a creek or dig or litter or do anything else. It simply restates the right to fish on our navigable streams belongs to all of us. A shade tree on a riverbank is unquestionably private property. It was there 50 years ago and likely will be there another 50 years. It was not like the waters that flow along and pass by that land. So over a year ago, a property owner along the Flint at Yellow Jacket Shoals sought to prevent the public from fishing on that stretch of river, claiming ownership of the riverbed to the midpoint of the stream, claiming the exclusive right to fish on that section. Georgia Wildlife Federation, along with some of our partners, objected to that opinion. The Georgia Department of Natural Resources agrees with that opinion, as you've basically seen here today. The Georgia DNR agreed, expresses an opinion long held within the department that the Flint at that point was navigable and fishable by the public. It was backed by a long history of fisheries management, stocking, as well as building and maintaining river access points for the public. The property owner filed a lawsuit to force Georgia DNR to enforce their claim. I would remind you, generations of Georgians had fished that very stretch of river. So despite these long-held opinions, the Georgia DNR settled out of court on Monday, March 27, and signed a final judgment order. The consent agreement essentially reversed DNR enforcement policy and acceded to every aspect of the lawsuit. As pointed out by one of our respected lawyer friends at DNR, through this agreement, provided a roadmap for everyone who owns a property adjacent to a stream in Georgia to assert both property rights and the right to exclude the public from fishing. So if we want to talk takings, the nexus of the settlement takes the constitutional right of anglers to fish those public waters. There we go. And it literally takes the fish, that belong to all Georgians as part of Georgia's public trust doctrine. The agreement was based not on the navigability of the river, but on laws and court cases, going back, talking about state land grants issued prior to 1863. So as you all know, outrage was palpable among Georgia's roughly 1 million anglers. Since fish stocking and fisheries management, virtually every penny are paid for by anglers through the purchase of license fees and federal excise taxes on fishing gear. Every Georgian, almost 11 million, for whom our state's wildlife are held in public trust, had a right to be outraged because all of us, fishermen or not, anglers or not, are the owners of all our state's fisheries. We were all told, essentially, we have to steer clear of fishing for the very fish we all own. This public ownership, this public trust, is the very foundation of the North American model of wildlife conservation. That's the most effective wildlife management strategy, quite literally, the world has ever seen. So Senate Bill 115 achieved final passage on that last day. The critical parts of this law states, Georgia is trustee of its people's rights to use and enjoy all navigable streams capable, and that's of all navigable streams capable of use for fishing, hunting, passage, navigation, commerce, and transportation, pursuant to the common law public trust doctrine. Summary, the Georgia General Assembly clearly and unequivocally stated that navigable waters of our state are open for fishing. It clearly states that all navigable waters are open to all Georgians regardless of when or where the state made grants of land. And with his signature, Governor Kemp secured his place as Georgia Sportsman's governor, and I think this General Assembly secured its place as the policymakers that protect hunting and fishing. We've heard many assertions that Senate Bill 115 endangers long-held regulatory standards on our rivers, like permitted water withdrawals, permitted water discharges, etc. Nothing could be further from the truth. Senate Bill 115 was never intended to do those things. The attorneys I've discussed with agree that it doesn't, and I expect you will hear attorneys reinforce that opinion today. I've recently heard claims that allowing public fishing of shoal bass might even damage our shoal bass populations. I remind everyone here, I probably will get almost unanimous agreement on this, hunters and anglers are our original conservationists. In utilizing our North American model, our game animals and our sport fish have seen a remarkable recovery. Anglers don't destroy fish populations. They advocate for and work for habitat for the future. Just listen to the words of our Trout Unlimited partners I think you'll hear today. The fishing access story is not over. After the legislature adjourned, our governor signed the bill. Another lawsuit. Remember, this started from a lawsuit. After all of this was signed, another lawsuit claiming almost exactly the same, making almost exactly the same claims was filed by a different landowner. They followed that roadmap that was laid out. So as there continues to be folks that would take away those traditions, and they would in fact silence the Marshall Tucker Band's lyrics of going down to the river. This isn't an easy issue. It's the reason the study committee needed to be formed. Just across the border in North Carolina, these issues are being discussed across the country. In North Carolina and South Carolina, if you can put in a kayak, paddle, and fish, it's legal. In some western states, if your feet can stay wet, it's legal to publicly fish. In other western states, their courts have determined no stream is navigable, and anglers have to get landowner permission to fish on any river or stream. In Georgia today, we stand up and say these navigable streams belong to all of us. Navigable streams belong to all of us, not just those that border them. Our fish belong to all of us, not just those that own the land next to them. We all have a constitutional right to hunt and fish. That right doesn't belong to just to those that own land. This is America. We seek the protection of the rights of all Georgians to enjoy the bounty and beauty of this great state. Thank you to committee members, and thank you all that are in the audience for being engaged. Thank you for studying this critical issue. It seems our hunting and fishing traditions are always under assault these days, and it's up to us to pass them along to future generations. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have. Glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Worley. Any questions?
If I may.
Chairman Leverett.
Thank you, Mr. Worley, for your testimony. Thank you especially for the Marshall Tucker reference. I appreciate that.
One of my favorites.
So does the, I think you've made clear the Wildlife Federation's position on the settlement in the Yellow Jacket Shoals case. Do y'all take a position on the current definitions of, well, let me back up a second. I think you've acknowledged and Director Robinson acknowledged that generally the issue of ownership of the bed of a stream turns on navigability. If it's navigable, the state still retains from the low water mark to the low water mark. If it's non-navigable, the property owner owns to the thread of the stream, and if they own on both sides, they own the entire width of the stream. Are y'all as a federation, you take a position on those definitions or that policy? Are you asking this committee to recommend some kind of change to those definitions?
So I will tell you, I know you're going to be hearing from an attorney that understands the legal components of this much better than I do, but I will tell you that
Yeah, and I'm not asking for a legal opinion. I just
Yeah.
wonder if y'all have a position on that issue.
Yes, sir. Our position, and to be honest with you, we've looked at possible definitions of navigability. We've came up even during the legislative session and understood it's probably the most difficult question we're going to ask ourselves. And we couldn't come up with a quick answer. So what we are absolutely, our position is that we are in favor, if a stream is navigable, it should be fishable by the public. Our public makes the investment. And we often hear folks say, my property taxes pay for the management of the stream. That's actually not true. The management of streams is paid for. All of the work that Scott and his people do is paid for by fishing license and by federal excise taxes under a federal law called Dingell-Johnson. So boats and gas and fishing tackle and gear, all of that, we pay an excise tax on all that. Those are all the dollars that build all those boat ramps and manage those fisheries and pay for those fish hatcheries and all those kind of things. So we believe firmly that where those streams are navigable, where we are providing dollars by anglers to manage those streams, they should be available and accessible by those anglers. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
And I understand that position. So I believe up here, many of the streams are non-navigable. And there, I think, is a pretty well-established tradition of individual landowners spending money to help manage the fishery and to preserve the quality of the stream and the ecosystem in the stream. While I would agree that the state also contributes a great deal too, I think you're going to hear testimony today that a lot of the private landowners do too. And I think it's a little dismissive to say that it's only the state that's contributing to that sort of thing.
I totally agree. Where I'm coming from there, on those non-navigable streams of private ownership, we're not advocating for folks to be able to go onto those properties. That's not our position.
So you're not
at all.
advocating what do they call it, the wet boot rule or whatever, you mentioned that out west. You're not advocating for adoption of that rule in Georgia with respect
I
to
just really
non-navigable
when I
streams.
mentioned those
Let
things,
me step in here. If we're going to stay on time, we're going to have to move on. I'll tell you this, at least the chairman is not advocating for any wet boot doctrine in the state of Georgia, nor the changing of non-navigable rivers to a navigable river. So
nor are we.
And I don't believe you are either. So I certainly appreciate it, Mr. Worley. I appreciate your testimony, and thank you, Chairman Leverett. Let me move on to April Lipscomb. And Miss April, do you think you can stay right around 20 minutes? Or
I will try my hardest.
all right.
It may depend on how many questions Representative Leverett there has at the end. I do have slides.
You can get ready for them, they're coming. Depending on the chairman's discretion.
He said.
Yeah, I think I looked, didn't I?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is April Lipscomb. I am an attorney with the Southern Environmental Law Center. My practice focuses primarily on water law, water management, public fishing, or public access, things like that. So I was asked to come provide some background information on the history of fishing rights in Georgia and in America, as well as the public trust doctrine, which we've heard a lot about already today. So primarily, private fishing rights have been determined by property law and private property rights, as you've heard. Public fishing rights primarily have been established under the public trust doctrine in this country. So I'm going to explain each of those in turn, and both have roots in English common law. So under English common law, the right to fish was tied to the ownership of the submerged soils. So if you owned the submerged soils, you had the exclusive right to fish, the right to control fishing on your property. The way that those rights were established, if you had land adjacent to a river, you were deemed to own to the center thread of the river. And if you owned on both sides, then you owned the entire stream bed. Generally speaking, if those submerged soils were then owned by the crown, by the King of England, the crown, the sovereign, had the primary right to fish. So the crown, though, generally owned navigable waters in England, and navigable waters were only those waters that were influenced by the ebb and flow of the tide, so the arms of the sea. These were also known as royal rivers, became known as navigable rivers. So even though the crown owned those tidal waters, the public had a common right of passage and a common right to fish, this common right of piscery in England. So there were essentially three types of waterways under English common law. We had navigable rivers, which were tidal rivers, owned by the crown in trust for public use for fishing and passage. We had public highways, which were non-tidal waters. These were privately owned. The beds were privately owned, but there was a right of passage by the public. And then there were wholly private streams. So generally, your small streams, there's no way to pass through them at all. Those were completely privately owned. This was the law in the original 13 states. And so up until the Revolution, the crown owned the arms of the sea in America. And the inland waterways in the colonies were all privately owned here. That's the way it worked originally. And after the Revolution, this remained the law in Georgia for quite some time. So early Georgia cases recognized, again, these three types of waterways. This is the Young v. Harrison case, an early Georgia case. They were wholly and absolutely private property. There were rivers that were private property subject to the right of passage. And this distinguishing test between those was really just whether they were susceptible for use as passage. And then rivers where the tide ebbs and flows, so arms of the sea, and those were available to the public for fishing, navigation, and commerce. The courts also recognized that riparian property owners did not own the water itself, they just have a usufruct in the water. So that just means they had the right to use the water as it flows through. Now, to understand the evolution of fishing rights in Georgia, you have to understand how property was originally distributed in the state. So shortly after the Revolution, land to the east of the Oconee River was distributed to private individuals through head right grants. And then following some scandals that I'm not going to get into, Georgia decided to change up the system, and they distributed the remaining land in Georgia via land lotteries. And this map kind of shows you those land lotteries and when they were distributed. So if you can see from the map, almost the entire state of Georgia was distributed, into the 1830s. So I've read that approximately 30 million acres of land to the west of the Oconee were distributed via these land lotteries. I thought y'all might be interested to see kind of the way that worked. In setting up the land lotteries, we had land surveyors come out and survey each county, and the boundaries of the counties were different at the time, but the counties were divided into different districts, and then they surveyed kind of individual squares. So each one of those little squares in there was a plot that was then lotteried out to a landowner. So if you won, then you took ownership of that plot of land. And this is up in Habersham County. The Chattahoochee River is kind of on the west side. The Sequoia kind of peeks out from the other side. So just if y'all were interested in seeing that. And all grants of land are derived from the state of Georgia. That's also in our law. So that's an important fact to remember, that all grants of land came from the state or from the crown if they were crown grants. So again, common law still applied in Georgia during the land lottery time. So the state took ownership of the beds of the arms of the sea. Private landowners took the ownership of beds of all rivers and streams adjacent to their properties inland. Now in 1863, as we've already seen, Georgia adopted the 1863 code that somewhat changed this, or attempted to change this. So it kept the definition for non-navigable streams. So if it's, we'll establish a definition of non-navigability and navigability. And privately owned streams were those that were non-navigable. Navigable streams, the law then said that the riparian owners then only had the use to the low water mark. it didn't expressly discuss ownership of the beds. So the law remained silent on bed ownership of navigable streams when it was adopted in 1863. So after the law was passed, there was a court case called Florida Gravel Company versus Capital City Sand Company. The Georgia Supreme Court held in that case that this law does not actually apply to grants of land that were issued before 1863. So essentially, what that means is that if anybody can trace title to a valid land grant from before 1863, they can still own the private or the bed of the river or stream that is adjacent to them. So what that also means is that if you go back and think of this map here, almost every river and stream in the state of Georgia, if it can be traced back to a valid grant, could be susceptible to claims of private ownership. And this was the law that the parties relied on in Yellow Jacket Shoals. So even though the river was navigable there, because they alleged they could trace title back to a pre-1863 land grant, they owned the bed of the river and therefore had the exclusive right to fish because, again, the right to fish under the common law was tied to ownership of soil. And that's just, a map kind of showing the waters of Georgia. So essentially any of these waters could be challenged as being privately owned. Earlier this year, as we've heard, the legislature passed Senate Bill 115 that establishes that it is trustee of its people's right to use and enjoy all navigable streams capable of use for fishing, hunting, passage, etc., pursuant to the common law public trust doctrine. So this essentially changes the Parker v. Durham case, changes that holding regarding private pre-1863 grants of land. So we've heard a lot about the public trust doctrine, so I'm going to turn to that now. So the public trust doctrine also has its roots in the English common law, right? So the Crown owned the arms of the sea in trust for the public. And the public had the right of passage, had the right to fish, etc. Under the English common law, the king could convey the beds of those lands, but only if he expressly stated his intent to convey away the rights. So if he wanted to convey away the public right of passage or the public right of fishing, that had to be expressly stated in the grant. So this concept came over to America and survived in tidal waters again. So first the Crown and then the states as their successors owned the beds of tidal waters in trust for the public. And those were deemed navigable rivers. Over time, however, the state and federal courts began to reject that English title distinction for navigability. And a lot of the court cases turned to this phrase from the United States Supreme Court in the Martin v. Waddles-Lessee case, which says, "For when the revolution took place, the people of each state themselves became sovereign and in that character hold the absolute right to all their navigable waters and the soils under them for their own common use." So courts basically started to say that, well, England had this dominant coastal geography, so their title distinction made sense in England. But the United States here has vast inland rivers and streams that extend for many, many miles above where they are influenced by the tide. And as a result, a different test must be used to determine the navigability of our rivers. And so the United States Supreme Court said that test is going to be navigability in fact. So we then had to figure out, okay, what is navigability in fact? What does that mean for riverbed ownership? And the United States Supreme Court started looking at this under the guise of the equal footing doctrine. So what that doctrine says is that newly admitted states are admitted to the Union on equal footing as the original 13 states. So newly admitted states then took title to the navigable waters and their beds in trust for the public on equal footing with the original 13. So the United States Supreme Court over time in a series of cases, has established that every single state in the Union, when it became part of America, when they ratified the Constitution, they took title to all of their navigable stream beds in trust for the public. And the Supreme Court also said that questions of navigability for determining state riverbed title, so for determining if the state owned the riverbed, that is a federal question that is determined by federal law. This is getting more complicated, I'm sorry. So the federal test for navigability, the United States Supreme Court said that to determine if the state owns a riverbed, you say, is the riverbed or is the water body navigable at the time of statehood in its natural and ordinary condition? Was the water body used or was susceptible of being used as a highway for commerce over which trade and travel were or could have been conducted in the customary modes of trade and travel on the water? And you look at the rivers on a segment by segment basis. So the Supreme Court said, if we want to figure out if the state of Georgia, for example, owns a riverbed, we would need to look at the river at the time of statehood, at the ordinary flowing condition of the water at that time. Was it navigable by the types of watercraft that were used for trade and travel at the time of statehood? That's a fairly tricky test, I think, for everyday people to apply. I don't think any angler out there is going to be able to do that and figure out which river they can go on or which river they cannot go on. And note, this test does differ from Georgia's definition of navigable stream. Georgia's definition, if you recall, says that the rafting of timber or small boats loaded with timber does not make a stream navigable. That possibly could have been a navigable water body under the federal test. So it's sort of unclear if the Georgia test applies for riverbed ownership. In my view, I think the federal test has to apply. So the public trust doctrine cases, the seminal case for the public trust doctrine is Illinois Central Railroad versus the state of Illinois. This is a United States Supreme Court case. This is a photograph of the Chicago harbor up there. In that case, the state of Illinois attempted through legislation to convey the bed of the Chicago harbor to a railroad for them to use to wharf out and build tracks and do all kinds of things. There was public outcry, and then the legislature repealed that legislation. And then the railroad company sued and said, you can't just revoke the property that you had already deeded to us or had given to us. And in that case, the United States Supreme Court acknowledged that title to the lands under navigable waters is a title that is different in character from that which the state holds in other lands intended for sale. So it is a title that is held in trust for the people of the state, that they may enjoy the navigation of the waters, carry on commerce over them, and have liberty of fishing therein, freed from obstruction or interference of private parties. So the United States Supreme Court said it was absolutely legal for Illinois to revoke that grant of land to the railroad because the control of the state for the purposes of the trust can never be lost. However, the state can convey land if it is promoting the interest of the public or if it can be disposed of without impairing any of the public interest in the lands and waters remaining. So this case has been cited all over the country, and the court's ultimate holding was that the ownership of the navigable waters under the harbor and of the lands under them is a subject of public concern to the whole people of the state, and the trust with which they are held is governmental, cannot be alienated, except when those parcels can be used in the improvement of the public interest or disposed of without detriment to the public interest. The court noted that the power to resume the trust whenever the state judges best is, we think, incontrovertible. So essentially, if there is a trust in land that is in trust for the public, what the United States Supreme Court said in that case is the state cannot convey away those trust rights. They can only convey them away if the public trust will not be impaired. The Supreme Court has since clarified that Illinois Central was a statement of state law and that the scope of the public trust doctrine is determined by state law. So while the state takes title to the navigable waters and their beds in trust for the public, the contours of that public trust don't depend on the Constitution, but the states retain residual power to determine the scope of the public trust within their borders. So after a state takes title to the beds of its navigable waters at statehood, it then may allocate and govern those lands under state law. Now, the overwhelming majority of states have expressly adopted the public trust doctrine to protect public uses of waterways, and they have done so in a variety of ways. I have a couple of examples from a few other states, just to give you all some background. In Florida, they have adopted the public trust doctrine actually in their constitution. They noted that it is apparent that the authority to control and manage submerged lands is restricted by the public trust doctrine, and they do not believe that such authority can be stripped from the state even if submerged land becomes privately owned. So in Florida, even if submerged land becomes privately owned, the state can enforce its trust obligations. Nevada did not expressly adopt its public trust doctrine until 2011, and in their analysis, they said that the gifts clause in their constitution actually provided a basis for their public trust doctrine. And it was appropriate for them to expressly adopt it at that time. We heard about North Carolina a little bit earlier. They've held that navigable waters are subject to the public trust doctrine, and where waters covering land are navigable in law, those lands are held in trust by the state for the benefit of the public, and that a land grant and fee embracing those lands is void, and that those lands are available to the public for fishing, navigation, and commerce. And in Oregon, Oregon's an interesting state because they also used to recognize the 3 types of rivers that Georgia also previously recognized, and they have over time expanded their public trust doctrine to include navigable waterways. So looking back to Georgia then and the public trust doctrine, there's been no discussion of the public trust doctrine at all in Georgia case law for navigable non-tidal streams. So for example, in that Parker v. Durham case that talked about the pre-1863 grant, there was no discussion of whether the state owned the beds of navigable waters and the trust for the public at statehood or what that meant or if it applied. There was just no discussion. But Georgia case law has recognized a public right of passage in all rivers that are susceptible for a common right of passage. So there are public trust concepts in case law and elsewhere in Georgia. So as we've already seen, the Georgia Constitution recognizes the tradition of fishing and hunting and notes that those shall be preserved for the people. Our gratuities clause also notes that the General Assembly does not have the power to grant a donation or gratuity. So conceivably, if there are public trust lands, the state cannot gift those away. Under the Georgia Code, we have codified the public trust doctrine for tidal waters. So we've recognized that the state is trustee of the rights of the people to use and enjoy all tide waters capable of use for fishing, passage, navigation, etc. Wildlife is held in trust for the public under state law. And then as we've heard a couple of times now, public funds are also used for river access and fisheries management. So there are public trust concepts in Georgia as well. So that is, I think I'll quickly add too, because the kind of wet boots doctrine has come up, the courts that have used the public trust doctrine to allow for that, in a lot of those states have adopted constitutional amendments that recognize that the people own the water itself. And a lot of those states also do not have a regulated riparian system of water rights. So instead, they have a prior appropriation doctrine. And so what courts in a lot of those states have said is that if there is unappropriated water at all in those rivers, that water belongs to the public for whatever use. And so they've relied on other laws and systems that are not in place in Georgia to expand those public trust rights into what we would consider non-navigable streams. So with that, I will take questions.
Thank you,
all right.
April. Any questions from the committee? Mr. Chairman.
I'm not
Thank you again
surprised.
for your testimony.
If you didn't know, Chairman Lever's a lawyer, so.
They knew.
They figured it out. You've obviously put a lot of work in your testimony. I appreciate all that. Is the federal navigability test, is that statutory, the one you cite in your materials, or is that common law?
Common law.
It's common.
Yes, sir.
And on that, I will end my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again, April. I appreciate your timing on that. All right, first, we're at 10:15. I think I'm gonna run through about 4 or 5 of these public comment folks, and Brad Coppage is gonna be the first one to come up. And while he's coming to the podium, I want to recognize Senator Steve Gooch. He just came in. Appreciate you being here. Thank you, Senator Gooch. All right, go ahead, Mr. Coppage.
Thank you. My name is Brad Coppage, and for the sake of today's meeting, I'm not going to be the city council member for Clarksville. I'm going to be the board president of the Soquee River Watershed Association based in Clarksville. And I'm truly honored, privileged to have the opportunity to address the members of the House Study Committee on the Right to Fish legislation as it pertains to the topic of non-navigable waterways. This 25-year-old organization, commonly referred to as the SRWA, is a nonprofit organization challenged with the protection and restoration of the Soquee River, its watershed and tributaries, a 29-mile-long non-navigable river that starts and ends in Habersham County. The Soquee River watershed contributes about 1/6 of the water that goes into Lake Lanier, the main water source for Metro Atlanta and other surrounding communities. Secondly, the Soquee River is identified as one of the top 3 premier trophy trout rivers in the country. Overall, a very valued state of Georgia resource that needs to be protected. Though the SRWA is a non-political organization with a core focus on executing river-based environmental and conservation work projects, including water quality testing programs, we do have an opinion of the right to fish law and its potential impact on the Soquee River if it is reclassified as a navigable waterway. I would like to share with the House Study Committee members today the SRWA's concern and recommendations for protecting and restoring of waterways like the Soquee River. Let me begin by making a common sense statement. If something isn't broke, don't fix it, which the SRWA organization would like to apply to the current definition for non-navigable streams in the state of Georgia like the Soquee River. In the opinion of the SRWA board, the non-navigable stream definition is one that is easily interpreted and clearly understood. A definition that, in our opinion, is the correct classification for the Soquee River. The SRWA is concerned that if today's hearing process leads to the final reclassification of the Soquee River waterway as a navigable water system and opens the door to expanded right to fish access on current private property, our organization and Habersham County loses all ability to protect and restore this valued resource from that day forward. Overnight, the Soquee River becomes the Chattahoochee River running through Helen, Georgia, where 29 miles of the Soquee River converts to a recreational playground, tubing, boating, open fishing to all licensed anglers, a new deposit area for trash and debris, a quickly contaminated river being a new bathroom option for those using and playing in the river. This once great trophy trout river now is a thing of the past. Endangered habitat and species unique to the Soquee River cease to exist. The once protected riparian buffers or riverbank foliage is eliminated by added foot traffic and by those individuals removing plants and trees for improved fishing and river access. The impact on the river will be devastating. The Soquee River watershed will experience greater water runoff filled with ground soil and sedimentation, adding to the destructive silt issues plaguing the river water system already. The loss of natural riverbank vegetation and canopies will lead to the unfortunate elimination of wildlife habitat. The added silt deposits will eventually destroy riverbank plant life and existing species ecosystems. The issue today is one of magnitude. So what price do we want to pay to increase river access by the reclassification of a waterway like the Sequoia River? For reference, it took the SRWA about 10 years from '05 to '15 and thousands of grant dollars from the Clean Water Act to bring key areas of the Sequoia River back to a non-endangered waterway. And this was without the opening up of the river to thousands of new people seeking the right to fish. So let me be clear for the public record. The SRWA is not against fishing. It is definitely not against the rights of the license carrying fishermen, but we are concerned about the inability of government agencies and departments to properly protect and restore rivers, watersheds, and tributaries due to the complexity and cost of the task. If government is not able to take care of one river properly, can you imagine the situation if other rivers in the state of Georgia lose their non-navigable status, a situation that is very concerning? The SRWA is cautioning the House hearing committee members to be careful with addressing the right to fish challenge by changing a few words in a definition or changing a river's classification. We encourage the hearing committee today to seek other options of addressing the right to fish situation and providing a more valued experience for all licensed fishermen. First and foremost, this is not a challenge that should be decided on quickly. It should take years, a methodical process, a case study, because anything worth saving, like a natural resource, should be done in the right way for all parties involved. The SRWA is recommending that the hearing committee strongly consider some of the following courses of action. If the state of Georgia decides to increase public fishing access for licensed fishermen, then use fishing licensing funding to purchase or lease property from current private landowners, if that's what could happen. Only acquire property that the state can functionally and financially purchase and maintain. There must be an element of control with this process. State of Georgia must be responsible for their actions, so if the project is too big and moves too fast and not controlled properly, you get the scenario that I spoke about earlier with the reclassification of the Sequoia River. Once you go down the path of not understanding the impact of a decision, you really have no real recourse to fix it. The types of controls that I am alluding to involve conservation and environmental protection efforts. All state public access areas must be properly cleaned and removed of trash and debris on a timely required basis. If not, there's an example of a quarter-mile public Sequoia River fishing area on Highway 197 just outside of Clarksville, where the SRWA conducts periodic river cleanup efforts to eliminate trash and debris from getting into the river, like plastic water bottles, beer cans, bait containers, sandwich bags, styrofoam, fishing line, tackle, you name it. Currently, the state has failed in a number of ways to install outdoor trash containers at public river access sites that properly contain all trash inside until they are emptied. All fishing access pathways and entries to the river need to be eco-friendly, properly installed and maintained to eliminate erosion and water runoff issues. Area signage needs to be added to inform river users that they must stay on the pre-built pathways and open river access areas, and they are not allowed to walk and remove any plants or trees in the riparian buffers. If there is damage to the river access buffers, the state must be in a position to repair those areas immediately to reduce long-term damage to the river. In addition, the state of Georgia wants to improve the overall licensing fishing experience. It is important for the state to execute the following conservation and environmental measures. Increase the ongoing health and fish population in all public access areas by limiting the number of days that people can fish. Will curtail the elimination of stock fish populations. Close certain public fishing areas during the summer months when high water temperatures stress and kill large numbers of fish. All public access should only have a policy of catch and release. Note, the right to fish is not the right to catch. All public access areas should only allow barbless hooks to offer some level of protection to fish that are caught and returned to the water. create sustainable river habitats that allow stockfish to best survive, to feed, to repopulate, and protect themselves from predator wildlife. It is not the role of the SRWA today to lecture the House Study Committee on the actions or decisions that they need to make in conjunction with addressing the right to fish legislation. It is the SRWA's role, however, as an environmental group to make the House Study Committee aware of potential issues that come with making potentially wrong decisions. In closing, the SRWA offers their expertise and insights to help the House Study Committee at any time during the hearing process. The SRWA certainly wants to do their part to help find a workable solution for all parties involved. Thank you for your time today, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Coppedge. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you for the testimony. All right, our next name is Guy Kern, or Kern. Guy Kern, are you in the audience? Oh, Lord. Well, we'll pray for Mr. Kern. Let's see here. Mark Alley. Mark Alley, local property owner.
Thank you, Chairman Burkett and honorable committee members, for allowing me to speak this morning. Am I coming across okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I get nervous and I don't speak clearly sometimes. I especially want to thank Chairman Burkett for his opening remarks. They were most consoling and reassuring, considering my current state of mental capacity. Thank you, sir. Your assignment is certainly a difficult one with many problems and fewer solutions. Thank you for taking it on. My name is Mark Alley. I'm the fifth of 7 generations living on the family farm divided by the Sequoia River. Alley settled on the Sequoia in 1822, and we've managed the farm for 200 years, 201 this year. The Sequoia River that divides my farm has generally been a nuisance, as it runs through the middle and essentially makes 2 farms. It's an 8-mile trip to get from one side to the other. The river frequently floods. Stream bank maintenance is an ongoing matter. It's no pleasure to raft, boat, or float. One of our youth leaders decided he was going to take a youth group on a trip between bridges. His comment later was, "I will not do that again." We spent most of the time dragging the floats and climbing over log jams. Another floater was quoted as saying, "The greatest joy of that trip was seeing the bridge where we could get out." I don't think any shoal bass have made their way to my part of the Sequoia. Going back to my childhood, 60 to 65 years ago, the only fish I recall catching were some hornyheads, suckers, and an occasional catfish if the river was muddy. Sitting on a rock in the cool water on a hot Sunday afternoon was about the greatest recreational experience the river could provide. For the first 150 years, my ancestors would gladly have traded that river for more farmland. Then about 10 years ago, my neighbor, now a trusted business partner, approached me about stocking and feeding trout for fly fishing entertainment. The idea sounded good, and we came to terms. It was the best thing that ever happened to the farm. Now, we're not alone. There are probably a dozen or more similar enterprises on the Sequoia River, on the short Sequoia River. They basically have the same story. People come from all over for Sequoia River fly fishing. And the Sequoia is not the only stream like this. North Georgia streams are well dotted with other places much like mine. We finally found something to perpetuate the farm. All visitors contribute to the local economy, as most trips require a guide, overnight lodging, and food from local establishments. They do spend money while they're here. Numerous guides make a large part of their living on the Sequoia River. At least 2 fishing outfitters have established businesses in Clarksville centered around these activities. So why do I feel threatened, upset, and possibly angry? It's not in my nature to publicly speak or engage in debates on matters such as this, but a few points keep emerging in my mind. Senate Bill 115 was passed in the last hours of the legislative session, and it was described as a cobbled together bill. Cobbled together. According to the governor, who promptly signed it, I think at his earliest convenience, in his signing statement 1, he said, Senate Bill 115 seeks to ensure sportsmen have use of Georgia's navigable rivers. I have trouble with that word navigable, so please tolerate and forgive me. Of course, Senate Bill 115 reversed a recent court decision favoring property owners on navigable streams. But it does not stop there. A letter to the editor from the Georgia Wildlife Federation dated May 11th, 2022, entitled Public Access to Public Assets. Georgia fish belong to all of us, addresses fishing rights on the Flint and similar rivers, in which it makes a brazen statement. And I heard it earlier, we all heard it earlier, and it's not untrue. And all of our rivers' waters are untitled, owned by no one. Okay, I think we accept that. The water comes on our property, it goes off our property. But they go ahead and they specifically name our Sequoia River in that memo. In an April 4th, 2023 news release, Georgia Wildlife Federation and Georgia Hunting and Fishing Federation were credited for the lead role in passage of Senate Bill 115. Maybe folks on the Sequoia would not feel so threatened if they were not in the sights of this powerful and influential group. The governor, in his signing statement, also said, Senate Bill 115 allows for the public to hunt, fish, and transit the navigable waters of this state. He goes on to say, to the extent some believe it stands for more. Some believe it stands for more than the navigable waters. I think this is where the wet boot theory comes in. There are people who think if the boots get wet, they can have access to the stream. And of course, House Resolution 519 establishes this committee. Now, do I feel threatened by House Resolution 519? Yes, I do. It's heavily worded against all that I am doing as a stream manager today. It contains half-truths and misrepresentations. The resolution names many jobs performed by DNR contributing to the well-being of fish and fishermen in the state, paid for with tax and license fees. However, DNR does absolutely nothing for our part of the river. The fish they stock at the nearby bridge leaves in a cooler after a short period of time. There are no boat routes and there's no public access. In fairness, and in light of hearing Scott Robinson speak earlier this morning, I think it's accurate to say that North Georgia was somewhat omitted in the facts and findings of House Resolution 519. It's a far reach to attempt to describe the Sequoia River navigable in any form or fashion. We're talking about a strip of land a few feet wide, covered by just a few inches of water. A few feet wide and a few inches of water. We have taken a nuisance river with some scenic beauty and great potential, and we made an asset out of it. There's evidence that this stream will not sustain a trout population as they do not reproduce in our stream. This past summer, high temperatures and low water killed about 90% of our stock fish. Yes, we stock the stream periodically through the system and we feed daily. The fish are protected with catch and release. Commitment and dedication by homeowners, property associations on the river, and property associations on the river have contributed to a well-stocked river. Everyone does their part, and the issue that we are facing today definitely has created a bond and an allegiance between the homeowners and larger property owners. I don't think it's going away. The public taking of fish or an aggressive right to fish approach will decimate the stocked trout population. It will revert the river to a horny head stream and collapse the entire industry that has grown here. We'll see loss of jobs, business closed, property values decline, and larger properties will fall prey to further development. I have experienced no dissent or concern regarding fishing rights in my entire life on the Squee River. It's simple and straightforward. The land under the water is privately owned. It's titled and paid for. We pay taxes on it. The water belongs to the public. The water comes on my property each day and just as much leaves. Ownership of the water is very fluid. We pay for the fish and we pay for the fish food, and the fish are free to travel as they please. If the state wants to claim them as wildlife, I suppose they can. Sometimes to the neighboring property or sometimes to public water. Some of the largest fish ever caught here were on public water that were private fish. My fish and my neighbor's fish may commingle, but for certain, most of the DNR fish that are stocked at the bridges with public funds leave quickly in a cooler. I might add, trespass on private property. I've got 350 acres, and trespass is really not a problem. I feel that DNR in their wildest dreams and greatest ambitions do not want or need the problems and issues that would come to public access on our small, non-navigable streams. There is no way the state of Georgia would stock and maintain fishing levels to the extent that private enterprise is doing now. We are truly satisfying a great need in the fly fishing industry. In summary, I've never been approached by a sportsman wanting to take the fish on my land, claiming they were paid for with license fees or that public funds financed what was mine. All I have received is comments of gratitude from hundreds of anglers who continue to return. We have no problem, and we do not need to be in the sights or a victim of a powerful lobbying group such as the Wildlife Federation. Sportsmen, landowners, homeowners, and other stakeholders here have understood and abide by private land rights, water rights, and game and fish laws. If we're on the Squee River, we must play a role of conservationist and protect this river. That concludes my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Alley. I appreciate that. Any questions from the committee? Mr. Alley, you got one question here.
Mr. I've got one question. No, that's fine. Go back there because you're probably going to respond. Thank you for your comments, and I really appreciate them. So my question is earlier one of the gentlemen testified that property on the river increases in value over a period of time. You stated 7 generations. You're the 5th of 7 generations on this property. Is that correct?
7, yes, sir.
And in any of that time, have you ever not been required in perpetuity to pay property taxes to support the ownership of that land?
Now, I'm sorry, I did not catch.
Have you always had to pay property taxes, and your family and all those generations paid property taxes on that?
Yes, sir, we do pay property taxes.
One of the things that I think is forgotten by a lot, wasn't mentioned by others, and I understand that they're to advocate, is many of the property owners that own property on the river also are anglers and hunters and pay fishing licenses, and they pay hunting licenses. In addition, they pay property taxes. I just want to make sure that we don't forget that we're all Georgians and you guys are doing a lot. And those property taxes haven't gone down over the years, have they?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Alley. For right now, we're going to take a 5-minute recess. We got a group of folks up here who's traveled a long way, had a lot of coffee. So let's take a 5-minute recess and reconvene at about 10:51.
Well put, sir.
All right, folks, let's try to get us back going. I'm running 3 minutes behind at this point.
It's like herding chickens.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Phoebe. All right. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead. All right. So I'm just counting the number of folks that are signed up to speak, and if I don't limit this conversation, we are going to be here till tomorrow, and I don't expect anybody wants to be here until tomorrow. So, if you would, let's try to limit to around 5 to 7 minutes, if possible, per speaker. I would appreciate it, and I'm certain that everybody else would appreciate it. All right. So our next speaker is going to be Marty Simmons with Fern Valley on the Sequoia.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll try to be brief. I won't recite any rock lyrics. I don't have any charts on that. My name is Marty Simmons. I'm here with my wife. We own and operate Fern Valley on Sequoia. It's a trout fishing venue. We moved to Clarksville 24 years ago. And when I first moved up here, a good friend explained to me, she said, there's two types of people in Habersham County. You've got your natives and you've got your move-ins. And Marty, you're a move-in and you'll always be one. And I kind of I understand that. And part of that reason, I think the natives up here, sometimes they get a little weary of advice, especially from people coming from Atlanta or Florida. They come up here and tell them how to do things, what needs to be done. I used to live in Atlanta, and I realized if you live in Atlanta, you don't want to hear, we used to do it this way up north on that. And the natives have run this county very well. They've done a great job at it. And when it comes to the river, a few years back, there were some farmers, some native folks, and they started a cottage industry up here, trophy trout fishing. These farmers, they can make a little bit of extra money by charging anglers to come on their property and fish. They did it very well on that. They ran the river well. So as not to deplete the river, they did only fly fishing, catch and release. They stocked the river when they needed it. They fed the fish. They made sure the river was clean and well maintained. They were sustainable before sustainable became an everyday word. Their success, of course, led to other venues. Ours was one of them. We're Copcat. I am a partner with Mark Alley on that. His land adjoins mine, so we combined them together, and we made a fishing venue. And I also want to show that natives and move-ins do get along very well and work together well. Last year, Fern Valley hosted 1,200 fishermen on our property. We're just one of 9 or 10 outfitters on the river, so you can extrapolate the figures on that. 99% of our guests were from out of the county. So we've had anglers from every state. We've had them from Canada. We've even had them from Europe. And they've come to Georgia for for the purpose of trophy trout fishing. If you haven't ever been, we invite you to come visit. It's a unique experience. The Sequoia has some very big fish. People have a great time up there. Last year, we spent $20,000 stocking the river. We spent another $5,000 just supplemental feeding of the fish. So we are making our contributions to the fish in the river. They're not all public stock fish. In fact, the nearest stocking point's 5 miles from us. And I would say that there's almost no chance of any of the DNR's fish getting to us. It's a good partnership. The DNR is taking care of the public section of the river. There's a mile of the river that's public. There's a lot of the river that's private on that. But this industry up here, our cottage industry, all these fishermen from out of town, they spend money with lodging, they spend it with meals, they spend it with gas and groceries, they spend it in the retail stores. Clarksville has 2 fly shops now. 6, 7 years ago, we didn't have any. We have 2 thriving, fly shops on there. Private enterprise, you have to admit, sometimes can do things that the state can't do, either because they don't want to or they just don't have the capability of it. Up here, private enterprise has done a very good job. We have a thriving river. We're very proud of the Sequoia River. I don't think you'll find a cleaner river than we have up here. And most importantly, all this private property helps keep this river green. If you're a farmer up here, it can be pretty tough. I don't think you can just make money raising cattle, growing corn, or anything like that. You've got to look for every source of income you can get. And most of the private property we're talking about are farms or they're timberland. And for these people, they've got to get income anywhere they can, whether it be from raising cattle, growing corn, putting a cell tower on your property, selling timber, or charging people to fish. And I think you need to look at the unintended consequences of this. If the Sequoia is made public and they lose that fishing opportunity, that's just another knock on their income. And one thing, if you really care about conservation, these farms are what are keeping the county green on that. If they are not able to get the income, one day they're going to be forced to sell. And I'm in the real estate business and I understand developing. And instead of a farm like Mark's where you have 350 acres, you'll one day have 300 homes and a golf course lining the river. So I think we need to look at whatever we can do to protect these farms. And like I said, one of them is allow them to get their income off that. I implore this committee to think about the ramifications of their actions. Trout streams are limited. You can fish a trout stream out. You can stock a stream and 3 days later, you can't go find a fish in there. If you don't manage them, they're not as good. We have a great public-private partnership up here. We do our part, DNR does their part, everybody does a good job. So what I would implore you is for the future is to leave the Sequoia alone, let it stay as it is. Everything, we will take care of it if you just let us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. That's good. Appreciate you. Mr. Stanley London, London Farms.
First of all, I thank you for letting me, or this committee for allowing me to speak. I don't own river land on the Sequoia, but I do own a Chattahoochee, and I'm just going to give you a little illustration of what we own and what we tend, and give you the farmer side. I'm a farmer. I've never had a job. I'm a full-time farmer, and I'm proud of it. I help provide food for this country, and I'm proud of that. But we own 2,775 feet of the Chattahoochee River. We own 700 feet of the Moss Creek. We own 8,874 feet of Flat Creek and White Creek. We rent 9,919 feet of Chattahoochee. We rent from Flat Creek and White Creek and Moss Creek another 9,306 feet. We have a total of in charge, counting rented and owned, 12,694 foot of river frontage. We have 18,880 feet of creek frontage, and we own 515 acres of land, and we rent 510 acres of farmland. Now, my biggest concern, if we open this can of worms and start giving access to a river, where's it gonna come on our property? Now, my daddy started, with none of this land has been inherited. My daddy went to Ohio in the 40s with his brother and sent money back for his mother and daddy to buy the Chattahoochee River right above Duncan Bridge. And this has been by hard blood. It's been by blood, sweat, and tears how we own this property. It's not been handed down to us. I graduated high school in 77. And in the 70s, my senior year in high school, we had an opportunity to buy the farmland that White Creek goes through. And I told my daddy, I said, I have to pay for it if you'll buy it. And so I went to football. I got up in the morning to work, went to football practice, come back home and work, and went back to football practice to own this land. And we pay taxes to the river. All our county taxes goes to the center of the river, and gives us. And I pay property tax on all of it, and nobody has given us to it. And we try to be good stewards of the land. We try to fence out all the creeks and all the rivers, and all of our land. We got over 90% of it fenced out. We repair the creek beds when the river gets up and the creek gets up. And we try to be good stewards of the land. And I just wanted y'all to see the farmer side of the property. Now my daddy loved to fish. Every 4th of July we went fishing. And he wanted to make sure he had a place for his boys to fish. So we either went fishing on land we owned or land we had permission. We did not go on somebody's land without getting permission, or we owned it. And so I just want to make sure y'all see the property side and the value of what property is. And I don't want that right took away. I'm just a farmer, but I'm proud of it. And I'm proud of my heritage. And we bought and paid for it by the skin of our teeth, and we worked a lot of hours. Hey, we don't work 8 to 5. I don't need to be here today, but I'm concerned of our property rights. And I want to be here. I want my voice heard to know that, hey, we're striving to take care of, farmers get a bad rap. We get thrown under the bus. A lot of times we can't control the weather, but the greatest conservation is people as landowners. People, they don't want to abuse their property. My daddy rolled on his grave if he thought I was abusing the river, abusing the land today, because he worked for it. And so I asked all y'all, this has been done really. I don't even know if we got a voice now. But I asked y'all, well, surely we got a voice. We don't give our property rights away. And if we open the door, that's my biggest concern. We've opened the door now. And where is it going to go to? Where's it going to go to? My son's here today. He's got a master's degree at college. Come back to the farm to work. Could have worked anywhere else, but come back to the farm. We got a passion for our land, and we got a passion for what we do. And so don't take it away from us. Don't take it away from us. And I appreciate y'all's time. I know y'all service. Y'all elected. And that's what y'all do. Y'all servant of us. And I appreciate y'all consideration of all our property rights. Thank you for your time. And thank y'all, everybody, for being here today.
Mr. London, thank you for that passionate testimony. My father-in-law's a farmer down south, and I agree with your statement that most every farmer that I know and property owner is a conservationist, and I appreciate you pointing that out. Next, I have Paula Hannington with Clarksville. She's a Clarksville resident.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you all for being here. And I want you to recognize that only in America do we as citizens have the opportunity to appear person to person before the people that we have elected to govern us and to handle these matters. My name is Paula Hannington. I live here in Habersham County. I live on Highway 197 North. I do not live on the river, but I live across the road from the river. So I get to, thank you, sir. So I get to see a lot of what goes on. I'm concerned about property rights. But first I want to show you something. I pulled this out of my wallet. This is my Georgia lifetime sportsman's license. I have white hair. I am over 65 years of age. So I get the lifetime license, and mine says it's good until about 200 years from now, and I intend to use it for that entire period of time. So I'm here not only as a sports person. I enjoy hunting, I enjoy fishing, I enjoy all the things that go along with that, but I also am here as a retired lawyer. And I am very much concerned about what appears to be an effort to attack property rights in the state of Georgia. Georgia recognizes property rights of the owners of real property and the right to control that property. If you own property, you get to control it subject to certain regulatory items there. And Georgia makes a difference about waterways. We've all heard a lot about it this morning, navigable waterways versus non-navigable waterways. And under Georgia's code, a navigable stream is one that is capable of transporting boats loaded with freight in the regular course of trade for the whole or a part of the year, but merely rafting timber down in a wet season does not make a stream navigable. Now, at common law, the owners of streams derive their grants from the state or from prior Crown grants. And the case of Parker versus Durham that Ms. Lipscomb brought to us earlier reminded us that the 1863 code did not change those rights. If the 1863 code did not change those rights, then Senate Bill 115 should not change those rights, and I think it will be attacked and will be that will be the outcome of the court. I also want to talk about how we even got to this point to start with. You know, in Georgia, if you've looked at the legislature for any period of time, you understand the process of making laws, and I'm not preaching to the choir. You all understand it far deeper than anyone else in this room. But bills are introduced by the elected membership, articles of legislation then have a first reading. It's referred to a committee for study, inquiry, and that may include having public hearings for the public to express their opinion. If it's reported out of the committee favorably, then it's read 3 times before you have a vote. That allows members time to study it and the public time to have input on it. Senate Bill 115 was introduced on February the 8th, originally as a bill related to the Georgia National Guard and the life insurance program for the Guard. It appears that it went through the usual cycle of reading, committee review, and it passed the House and, passed the Senate, went to the House, and it kind of died. Well, on the very last day of the session, that bill came up, the guts were stripped out of it, and what passed as 115 came out. The substitute measure was a declaration by the state of Georgia that the state now declares that a landowner could, even if you could trace your land grant back to a land grant or a Crown grant, and you were entitled under the law to control both sides, if you own both sides of the stream, you could control it. Then now, according to what's the new law, the state's going to control that. You're not going to control it. That was passed by both the House and the Senate on March 29th. That was done without the benefit of it being read 3 times in each chamber, without going through any committee, without review by the Office of Legislative Counsel. On that same day, March the 29th, the House passed House Res 519, which is the creation of this committee, and thank you all gentlemen for doing that and being here. But it established a House study committee to review the, quote, review the circumstances wherein private landowners from time to time attempt to exclude public fishing in streams that are declared as non-navigable and flow through private properties. Now, the resolution says that it's unclear whether or not the state can convey to landowners the exclusive use and control of streams for fishing, where the state's public trust document established that the state holds and manages fish in trust for the public, and that there's a need to examine the public's right to fish and the private property rights of the landowners to identify and reconcile inconsistencies or conflicts. For those of us on the outside looking in, it seems that the Senate bill that got passed is a taking by the state of the ownership of navigable stream beds that these property owners have been able to trace back to before 1863, on which those property owners have paid taxes for the ownership. And it looks that the House resolution is attempting to look and see if this is going to apply in non-navigable streams. You know, as a private citizen, that just looks like political maneuvering at its worst. It looks like things happening behind closed doors, and it does not look like what we have cherished for all of our lifetimes as the way that our laws are made in this state. And on the same process, I want to point out, Mr. Worley, who was very well spoken, reminded us that hunting and fishing rights are part of the Georgia Constitution. The Georgia Constitution is set out in articles. Article 1, first thing, Section 1 is basically a restatement of the Bill of Rights from the Constitution of the United States. Section 2 talks about the structure of state government. Section 3 of Article 1 talks about the property rights of the citizens of this state. And that says private property shall not be taken or damaged for public purposes without just and adequate compensation first being paid. If somehow this goes forward and all of these non-navigable waterways are now declared to be open to public use, I shudder to think how much compensation is going to need to be paid to all of these folks for their families' hard work that has gone into obtaining, maintaining, and continuing to own those waterways and paying the property taxes for generations. Gentlemen, I submit to you that, as Mr. Ainley said, if it ain't broke, let's don't fix it. Thank you.
Amen.
A question for Mr. Chairman.
Representative Williams.
Yes, ma'am. Before the gentlelady sits down, I was very impressed with your knowledge of what we do. And present company excluded, it better than 75% of the folk that come to the House and the Senate. And I know you said you've got a lot of years left, so I want a commitment that you'll stay in the mountains and not come to the coast and run against me.
Yes, sir. As much as I would appreciate to be on the coast, I have found my spot and I have found my
am so happy.
Thank you, Ms. Hannington. Next, we have Emily Owenby, Noontula Creek Farms.
Hey there, committee members. Thank you so much for giving us the chance to speak with you all, and thank you for the work that you are doing. The challenge before you is boundless, but I trust that you'll conclude it well. My name is Emily Owenby, and I'm proudly the fourth generation of Noontula Creek Farms. Noontula Creek Farms is in Blue Ridge, in the outskirts of the trout capital of Georgia. We have guided fly fishing, guided quail hunting, sporting clays, farmhouse lodging, and more. Unfortunately, I'm unable to attend the meeting next week in Fannin County, so I'm here with you today. I'm not here to talk about private property rights or the navigability of water. We've heard enough of that. I'm going to tell you about my family's experience with conservation. And just to add, this is not only my family's experience, but it's the experience of many other private landowners in the state of Georgia. Our family's farm consists of over 1,200 acres and 2.5 miles of trout stream. Noontutla Creek is a 13-mile-long freestone creek, and about 8 miles of that is privately owned. We have spent the past 70 years managing our portion of private water and been fortunate enough to teach our neighbors how to conserve theirs as well. Because of our conservation practices, we've been able to foster the perfect environment for wild, naturally reproducing trout on our family's property, which is extremely rare in the state of Georgia. To naturally reproduce, trout need clean and cold water. We plant and manage our riparian buffer zones by the creek, which range from 50 feet to 100 feet throughout our 2.5-mile stretch, and these buffer zones play a huge role in water temperature management, erosion control, and bug life. The biggest hurdle we face in our conservation work is invasive species. We remove invasive species like Chinese privet, multiflora rose, autumn olive, and we replace them with native species. We treat hemlocks each year, treating about 300 trees this spring. We do this to fight hemlock woolly adelgid, which is a lethal invasive beetle that was brought in by humans that kills hemlocks. To help support this buffer, we replace the invasive species with native trees, shrubs, and plants in their place like white pines, river birches, red maples, honey locust, tulip poplar, red oak, and rhododendron. Last year, we planted over 2,000 trees. We will continue to plant each season to grow our buffer zone. Not only do we combat invasive species on land, but in the water as well. We have installed boot and wader cleaning stations to prevent any invasive species be carried in by our clients' gear into our stream. With the potential change, Georgia lawmakers will welcome a new invasive species onto our farm, the human race. Unlike the previously mentioned invasive species, we will not be able to control this. All private landowners have the opportunity to manage these streams through conservation practices. These waters are extremely sensitive to overfishing and habitat destruction. Everything in the environment is connected. All of our conservation efforts come full circle and have so many benefits to our waters. Everyone lives downstream. The reality of this situation is that if we allow the public to access our stream, we will see immediate devastation. The ecosystem we have fostered and nurtured for generations will be ruined. The public will come into our private waters, take fish, step on redds of spawning trout, leave trash, and so much more. Not only will this cause damage to our farm, but everyone downstream of us will also suffer. If you make the decision to allow access to our waters, it will change our family's business completely. It will reduce fishing revenue because we cannot promote a premier fishery that no longer exists. It will completely diminish hunting revenue because we cannot risk shooting someone. It will reduce lodging because our clients usually choose to stay when they participate in our offerings. We employ 5 full-time people, and each of them will be left unemployed and looking for a new job. This includes me. What will the future look like for us? The answer is heartbreaking. It would be development. The conservation, the hard work, the legacy would all go down the drain. This development would change the Noontutla watershed forevermore. Our stream at its mean width is 32 feet. Noontutla Creek has no recorded cubic feet per second, or CFS. A creek comparable in size to Noontutla is 74 CFS at its annual average. Private lands have higher soil quality, better water quality, and their private ownership tends to make them more productive when seeking any kind of environmental goal. There is not a need for more public access to streams. Georgia DNR and the U.S. Forest Service manage more than 1 million acres of public land, 500,000 acres of public waters, and 16,000 miles of streams and rivers in this state. There is an abundance of great places for anglers to recreate and fish all over the state of Georgia. If streams like Noontutla Creek were to be reclassified as navigable, privately held waters would need the same protection, if not more, as public waters. The Georgia DNR and the U.S. Forest Service will need to provide constant oversight on private property to prevent these pristine, untouched private streams from being overfished and ultimately destroyed. The DNR and the U.S. Forest Service unfortunately do not have the resources to manage private land. My proposal to the committee is to evaluate the definition of trout waters, which has been defined by Georgia's Environmental Protection Division, and completely exclude trout waters from Senate Bill 115. I also propose to you that you only clarify the definition of navigable water in Georgia and choose not to expand it. My family and I are committed to the farm, and we will continue to make sacrifices to enhance our conservation and protect our waters, as we proudly have for 4 generations. Thank you for your time. I will pray for you as you move forward and navigate through this difficult subject. Please contact me with any questions you may have, and feel free to come visit us at Untutla Creek Farms. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Owenby. Sorry, we're going to miss y'all up in Toccoa, but I know you guys have a family trip planned. Next, we're going to do one more before lunch, and then we'll do a 30 minutes lunch break, and then we'll jump back on this. We've got Roman Figuerilli from the Sequoia River property owner.
How y'all doing today?
Very good.
This is my neighbor Brenda Lacey. I've asked her to stand with me today I'll get to that in a bit. A couple things. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible because quite honestly, Ms. Hannington eviscerated everything I was going to say. So she did such a fantastic job. She's left me with the choice of being brief or beating the heck out of a dead horse. One thing that I kind of wanted to, we've touched on a couple things this morning, and quite honestly, these are things that I hadn't intended on bringing, but since they came up, we've referenced the governor's signing statement, which I have a copy of right here, his signing statement for 115. One of the reasons that Governor Kemp signed this document, I'm going to read right now, it was reason 2, he says, 2, this legislation does not affect non-navigable rivers or streams or change the definition of navigability. The definition of navigability is codified in a different subsection of this statute, and then he goes ahead and lists OCGA 448-5. Essentially, the governor signed this 115 because it did not change the definition of navigability. DNR this morning presented a copy of 4485, and I'd like to read it to you now if you don't mind. Rights of adjoining landowners and navigable streams. As used in this chapter, the term navigable stream means a stream which is capable of transporting boats loaded with freight in the regular course of trade, either for a whole or part of the year. The mere rafting of timber or the transporting of wood and small boats shall not make a stream navigable. The rights of the owner of lands of which adjacent navigable streams extend the low water. You've heard all of this, okay? I don't see anything in this document that talks about CFS, stream width, or anything else that the DNR raised this morning. So if the governor says that this is codified by this, it seems that any attempt to expand the definition of what is or is not navigable is not in the law. It seems arbitrary to me at best. So that's just something I wanted to touch on there as well. And I'm going to, again, try to be as brief as possible. This is a multi-dimensional issue. It's not just fishing rights. Fishing is just the tip of an iceberg, so to speak, if you look at the whole problem as a whole. We see fishing rights here, but underneath, there's a million other things that are, come to play. Ms. Hannington touched on a lot of them. We had Marty Simmons here talking about businesses, restaurants, hotels, things that all thrive on these things in our fishing. Incidentally, the woman that just spoke from Untutla Creek, we talk about private versus public land. I also am an angler. I've owned my property since 2001, but been fishing Georgia for 15 plus years. her particular property is fantastic, but there's also a public section of Noontula Creek, and it also is fantastic. And it is a vastly different opportunity than the private section. Her section has, beautiful trophy fish or whatever, but one of the most memorable fish I ever caught was on that private land, or the public land, the public section of Noontula. And it was a 9-inch native brook trout. And you can tell the difference between a stock fish and a native fish. Brook trout are the only natives to Georgia. So I think that when we get to talk about fisheries, public and private go side by side, and they're two vastly different things, both with their own merits. We talk about the constitutional right to fish. I can't see that anybody's constitutional right to fish is being prevented. There's still plenty of opportunity, like the woman said. I think there's 4,000 miles of trout stream managed throughout the state. There is a public section of the Soquee. We put these fish in the river a lot of times as landowners. We've heard Marty talk about stocking, Mark Alley, the same thing. And they put these fish in the river, understanding that they can go up and down the stream. They go onto his neighbor's property. Marty has never made the assertion that somebody should return those fish to him, that they were his fish. He understands they're in the public now. Okay? So I guess I have a hard time understanding why when the DNR puts fish in a quarter-mile section of the Sequoia River, that they don't have the same mentality that they can come onto private land and off of private land, but it can't be used as a cudgel to take your property rights, which is essentially what I feel that we have going on here. The fish are in the public trust. We get that. The private section of this river is a quarter-mile section, as I think somebody pointed out. It's abutted by Brigadoon Lodge on the south end and Black Hawk fly fishing on the north. Those are their immediate neighbors. That private section, the public section, is benefiting a heck of a lot from having these two trophy situations on the north and south end of it. So it goes both ways. It's also concerning if we're going to say all fish and wildlife are in the public trust. They are. I don't discount that. But where do we draw the line with that? Can you pursue deer off the Chattahoochee National Forest onto somebody's land? This is problematic. You're going to set a legal precedent that can happen. The fish and the wildlife are owned by the public, but the public's rights end where ours begin. I want to close out by saying, introducing you to my neighbor. This is Brenda Lacey. She's a very dear friend of mine. Brenda is not a fisherman. She does not fish. Brenda, what time do you get up in the morning to go to work?
About 5:30.
5:30 in the morning. She drives 45 minutes to Gainesville every morning with her and her husband, Jimmy, who is Jimmy, wave at us. He's seated right there. And they work hard. They work really hard. And the only thing Brenda wants is to come home and enjoy the property rights that she has paid for, that she has paid taxes on. The state receives this money from Brenda. And that's all she wants. I fish. I live next to Brenda. I've never once fished Brenda's property. She knows I fish. She's never asked me to fish, and I've never asked it of her because we respect each other. And this is how it should work, in harmony with public water and with private water. It got a little bit that, fishing is a huge part of what we are. We're looking at the tip of the iceberg, if that's the case. We're hoteliers. We're business people. We're fathers. We're neighbors. And we rely on all of this, it's what we've paid to do. It's what we have invested in. And this is how Brenda derives her enjoyment. So when we think about fishing rights and think about access and all this stuff, think about Brenda Lacey. She doesn't fish. She just wants to enjoy a peaceful evening after working hard. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Figueroa. We're going to take a recess for lunch. We'll come back at 12:04. Okay? Thank you.